This 3D rainbow cake is rainbow coloured inside and out, with gorgeous textured details, and best of all, it's easy to make. All you need is one round cake layer. Level it if it's domed by trimming the top off with a serrated knife like a bread knife, and then cut the layer in half horizontally. Now you have 2 round cake layers. Cut both of these in half to make 4 semicircles, and these will create the rainbow shape of your cake. This is an 8-inch layer of my vanilla cake, and the recipe is on britishgirlbakes.com. Choose a cake board that's at least 4 inches wider than your cake to leave space for the frosting, but we're going to assemble the cake before moving it onto this board. For rainbow frosting, I'm using 1 batch of my 4-minute buttercream. Set aside 1 cup of frosting for later and divide the rest into 6 bowls. Add a few drops of colour to each bowl, and I recommend gel colours because they're the most concentrated, so they'll give you the brightest and boldest colours. You'll need the smallest amount of purple frosting, then blue, green, yellow, orange, and for the red frosting, you'll need about 3 times as much as the orange. Red frosting can be tricky, but the secret is simple. Use a lot of gel. If you have time, after mixing the red frosting, you can cover it and leave it to develop for an hour, and it will get even darker. Now put each colour of frosting into a piping bag with the end of the piping bag cut off, but you don't need any piping tips for this part. You won't fit all of the red frosting into the bag, but that's fine, you can refill it later. I like to use glasses to hold the piping bags open, folding the top of the bag over the rim of the glass, and that keeps the top of the bag clean, so that your hands don't get covered in frosting when you pipe. Okay, let's make a rainbow. Pipe lines of coloured buttercream, following the curve of the semicircle to make a rainbow. If you start on the outer edge, the red first, it will be easier to keep the curve symmetrical than if you start at the bottom, with the purple. This piping will create a rainbow of filling within each slice when you cut into the cake. Now grab your big cake board and spread some frosting along the middle to act as glue, and then flip the cake over so that the flat side is facing down, and press it into the line of frosting, and it will secure the cake in place so it doesn't slide around as you frost it. Adjust it to centre it on the cake board, and then cover the cake with plain white frosting, which is called a crumb coat because it will trap any crumbs that come off the cake so that they don't get into the rainbow frosting next. Also, this layer of frosting is really important when you're going to be piping onto a cake, because this layer of frosting will completely cover the cake up and seal the moisture in. So even if there are any little gaps in between your piping, this crumb coat of frosting will make sure the cake doesn't dry out. It doesn't have to be neat because you're going to cover it with rainbow piping next, but get it as smooth as you can because that will give the cake a neat shape to build onto. I like to put cakes in the fridge to set the crumb coat while I'm preparing my frosting. Choose your piping tips, and piping will be easiest if you use smaller tips for the colours at the bottom of the rainbow and larger tips for the colours at the top of the rainbow. I'm using a 1M star tip for red and also for yellow, a 4B open star tip for orange, a medium round tip number 12 for green, a small petal tip number 102 for blue, and an open star number 199 for purple. Use an offset spatula or a toothpick or really anything sharp to outline the arcs of your rainbow. It's easiest to space them evenly if you start with a line in the middle of your rainbow and then score 2 lines above and 2 lines below. This will make 6 sections for 6 colours of piping. I'm going to pipe a rainbow on both sides of my cake, so I'm scoring the same lines on the other side of the cake too. To pipe the colours, it's usually easiest to start at the bottom and work your way up so you can see what you're doing, but if you're piping ruffles like this with a petal tip, it's easiest to do those colours first, wherever they are on your rainbow, to give you the most space to manoeuvre the piping bag. A petal tip looks like a teardrop, and when you're piping with one, the narrow end of the teardrop should always be pointing outwards from the cake, with the wide end pressed against the cake. And that way your piping will be more securely attached to the cake, and the piping you see sticking out from the cake will be thinner and wavier because it comes through the narrow part of the piping tip. For the purple, you could pipe an arc shape and leave the bottom section of the cake plain white, but I'm piping all the way down to the bottom to add the most colour to my cake. You might be thinking about how many piping bags I'm going to have to wash, and that's definitely the downside to rainbow cakes. If you want to minimise piping bags, you could put the coloured frosting straight into piping bags with these piping tips, and use those to pipe on the filling between the cake layers as well, instead of using the piping bags with no tips first. To pipe neat dots with a round tip, squeeze the piping bag and let the frosting bulge out from the bag. And then stop squeezing the bag as you pull the bag away, and that will leave a neat point on each dot. Piping will be the neatest and also the easiest on your wrist if your frosting is the right consistency. And I teach all about that in my online master course, The Basics of Cake. And the link for that course on my Cake School is in the top of the screen and below in the video description, or you can go to britishgirlbakes.com. The quickest piping is to use a large star tip, so you can just pipe one row to fill the entire band of colour. And a 1M tip is great for this, and it's also a tip that almost everyone has. Open star tips like this 4B tip are great as well. Just like with the round dots, if you stop squeezing the piping bag at the same time as you pull the bag away from the cake, you'll leave a neat peak on your piped rosettes. For the red, I'm piping waves, and you can see I've used this piping bag a few too many times because the buttercream is oozing out through holes in it. Quick tip to fix this: wipe the frosting off the outside of the bag and then use tape to cover up the holes and rejuvenate your piping bag for a few more uses. Having your cake on a turntable makes piping much quicker than if the cake is on the table or countertop, because you can keep spinning and adjusting it so that you're always piping at the angle that's most comfortable for you. Or in my case, the angle that's best for the camera. As well as the top arc of the rainbow, I'm using the red frosting to cover the top of the cake, piping the same wave texture all along the top curve. Another benefit of using a turntable is that you can spin it to see the cake from different angles, and then you'll notice any gaps between the piping, which you can fill in with more piping now, while you still have the coloured frosting in your piping bags. When you cut the cake, you can cut straight through it, but if you cut diagonally towards the middle of the purple frosting each time, you'll get a beautiful cross-section of all of the colours of filling, so there will be a double rainbow on each slice, one along the edge and another one through the middle. Check out my Cake School for online courses and memberships for constant inspiration and access to hundreds of cake designs and cake decorating techniques. The link is up here in the top of the screen and in the video description, or go to britishgirlbakes.com. Thank you for watching.